The flour sack split open the moment Olivia Zimmerman lifted it, sending a white cloud exploding across the floor of her small bakery, just as the church bells struck 7 in the morning on that sweltering June day in 1883. She stood frozen in the settling dust, her dark hair already escaping its pins, her apron now completely covered, and wondered for the 1,000th time if she had made a terrible mistake leaving Philadelphia to open this bakery in Georgetown, Colorado. The mining town sat high in the Rocky Mountains, and while the altitude sometimes left her breathless, it was the constant struggle to keep her business afloat that truly exhausted her. The miners wanted simple fare, bread and biscuits mostly, nothing like the delicate pastries and layered cakes she had learned to make in her father's bakery back east. But her father was gone now, the bakery sold to pay his debts, and she had taken her small inheritance and headed west, drawn by an advertisement promising opportunity and fresh starts. Olivia grabbed the broom and began sweeping up the spilled flour, her movements quick and efficient despite her frustration. She had 3 dozen rolls to have ready by 9, and Mrs. Henderson was expecting a pie for her husband's birthday. There was no time for self-pity, no matter how her shoulders ached or how the loneliness sometimes threatened to swallow her whole in the quiet hours before dawn when she fired up the ovens. The bell above her door chimed, and she looked up to see Thomas Wexler, who owned the general store 2 buildings down. He was a kind man in his 50s, married with grown children, and he had been one of the few people in Georgetown to welcome her without suspicion when she arrived 8 months ago. "Morning, Olivia," he called out, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Heard you might need some flour. Saw the delivery wagon pass my place, and the driver mentioned your last sack was damaged." "You heard correctly," Olivia said, managing a tired smile. "Though I am wondering if the freight company deliberately sabotages their goods just to sell more." Thomas chuckled and set a new sack on her counter, waving away her attempt to pay. "Consider it an investment. Those cinnamon rolls you make are the only thing that gets my wife out of bed on cold mornings. I will collect later. Do not worry." After he left, Olivia threw herself into her work with renewed determination. The morning passed in a blur of kneading dough, stoking the oven, and greeting the handful of customers who trickled in. By noon, she had sold most of her bread and all of the rolls, which meant she could afford to buy more sugar and perhaps even some of the dried fruit that had just arrived at the general store. She was just pulling the birthday pie from the oven, the crust golden and perfect, when she heard the commotion outside. Shouts, the thunder of hooves, and then a woman's scream. Olivia set the pie down quickly and rushed to her window. 2 horses were barreling down Main Street, still hitched to a wagon but with no driver in sight. The wagon swayed dangerously behind them, its wheels catching on the rutted road. People scattered, pressing themselves against storefronts. The horses' eyes showed white with panic, and foam flecked their mouths. They were running blind, terrified by something, and they were headed straight toward a group of children playing near the saloon. Olivia did not think. She ran out her door, her flour-dusted skirts flying, and grabbed the nearest child, a little girl of perhaps 6, yanking her out of the path of the charging horses. But her own momentum carried her forward, and suddenly she was in the street herself, facing down a ton of horseflesh and splintering wood with nowhere to run. Time seemed to slow. She could see every detail with horrible clarity. The wild eyes of the lead horse, the broken traces dragging in the dirt, the wagon wheel that would crush her if she fell. She threw her arms up instinctively, a useless gesture, and waited for the impact. Instead, she felt strong hands grab her around the waist, lifting her clear off her feet. The world spun, and then she was pressed against something solid and warm, rolling in the dirt as the wagon thundered past mere inches away. They came to rest in a tangle of limbs, and Olivia found herself looking up into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. The man above her had dark hair that fell across his forehead, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and those impossible blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. He was breathing hard, his chest rising and falling against hers, and for a moment neither of them moved. "Are you hurt?" he asked, and his voice was low and rough, touched with concern. Olivia realized she was gripping his shirt, her fingers twisted in the fabric. She forced herself to let go. "No, I am fine. You saved my life." He rolled off her and stood in one fluid motion, then reached down to help her up. His hand was calloused and strong, and even through her shock, Olivia felt the warmth of his touch spread up her arm. Once she was on her feet, he steadied her, his hands on her shoulders, those blue eyes searching her face. "You are bleeding," he said, gesturing to her temple. Olivia touched her head and her fingers came away red. She must have scraped it on the ground. "It is nothing." "Those children, are they safe?" "Everyone is safe, thanks to you." He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and pressed it gently to her temple. "You are either very brave or very foolish, running into the street like that." "Probably foolish," Olivia admitted. The world was starting to feel unsteady and she swayed slightly. His grip on her tightened. "Let me help you inside," he said. It was not really a question, and Olivia did not have the strength to argue. She let him guide her back toward the bakery, aware of the eyes watching them from doorways and windows. Georgetown was a small town, and this would be the talk of the dinner table in every home by evening. Inside the bakery, he helped her into the chair she kept by the counter, then took the handkerchief away to examine her injury. His touch was surprisingly gentle for such large hands. "I do not believe it needs stitching," he said, "but you should probably have the doctor look at it." "I cannot afford the doctor for a scratch," Olivia said, then immediately regretted the words. She did not want this stranger, this man who had saved her life, to know how precarious her situation was. "I mean, it truly is not serious enough to bother him." He looked at her for a long moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he understood exactly what she had not said. Then he smiled, and it transformed his whole face, softening the hard edges and making him look younger. "I am Austin Hayes," he said. "I work at the Silver Peak Ranch about 5 miles north of town. Olivia Zimmerman. I own this bakery, though I suppose you figured that out." She gestured around at the flour-covered surfaces and the lingering smell of fresh bread. "I figured." Austin glanced toward the window, where the street was still full of people discussing the runaway horses. "I should go see about catching those animals before they hurt themselves or someone else." "Wait," Olivia said, standing up too quickly. The room tilted, and Austin caught her elbow. "I never thanked you properly. You risked your life." "So did you," he pointed out. "For a child you probably do not even know. That takes courage. Or foolishness, as you said." Olivia smiled despite her shaky legs. "Will you come back later? I would like to repay you somehow." "Perhaps with dinner." The words were out before she could stop them, bold and forward in a way that would have horrified her mother. But something about Austin Hayes made her want to throw caution aside, made her want to know more about the man behind those blue eyes. Austin's smile widened. "I would like that very much, Miss Zimmerman. I will return around 6 if that suits you." "That suits me perfectly, Mr. Hayes." After he left, Olivia sank back into her chair, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with her near-death experience. She touched the handkerchief he had pressed to her temple, noting the initials embroidered in one corner. A.H. The fabric smelled like leather and sage, and something else she could not quite name but knew she would never forget. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange daze. Olivia delivered the pie to Mrs. Henderson, who fussed over her injury and tried to press a silver dollar into her hand for saving the mayor's niece, which Olivia refused. She closed the bakery early and went upstairs to her small apartment above the shop, suddenly aware of how shabby everything was, how plain. She had one good dress, a blue cotton with white trim that she had not worn since arriving in Georgetown. She pulled it out now, brushing away the dust and holding it up to the light. It was simple but well made, and it brought out the green in her hazel eyes. Her mother had sewn it for her 21st birthday, just a year before the fever took her. Olivia heated water on her small stove and washed away the flour and dirt from the day, then carefully pinned up her hair, leaving a few tendrils loose to soften her face. She looked at herself in the small mirror above her wash basin and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright, and despite the scrape on her temple, she looked almost pretty. She had just finished setting the small table by the window when she heard boots on the stairs. Austin knocked softly, and when she opened the door, he stood there with his hat in his hands, looking uncertain for the first time. He had cleaned up too. His dark hair was damp and combed back, and he wore a clean shirt and vest. He looked like he was going to church, and something about that made Olivia's heart squeeze. "Come in," she said, stepping back to let him pass. "I hope you are hungry. I am afraid I got a bit carried away." The table was laden with food. Roasted chicken that she had traded from the butcher, fresh bread still warm from the oven, butter and jam, green beans from the garden she kept behind the building, and a cherry pie that was her specialty. It was too much for two people, but Olivia had wanted to show him what she could do, wanted to thank him properly. Austin's eyes widened. "Miss Zimmerman, this looks incredible, but you did not have to go to all this trouble. Please call me Olivia. And yes, I did. You saved my life today." She gestured to the chair across from hers. "Besides, I like to cook. It is what I know how to do." They sat down, and for a few minutes there was silence as they filled their plates. Olivia felt suddenly nervous, aware of how close they were in the small space, aware of his hands as he passed her the bread, aware of the way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching. "This chicken is perfect," Austin said after his first bite. "And this bread. I have not had bread this good since I left home." "Where is home?" Olivia asked, grateful for the opening to learn more about him. "Missouri originally. A small farm near St. Louis. I am the youngest of 6, and there was not enough land for all of us, so I headed west 5 years ago. Worked my way through Kansas and Nebraska before ending up here last winter." He took another bite, then looked at her directly. "What about you? You do not sound like you are from Colorado." "Philadelphia," Olivia admitted. "My father was a baker, one of the best in the city. He taught me everything he knew, but he died last year and there was nothing left for me there, so I came here looking for a fresh start." "Have you found it?" The question was simple, but Olivia heard the real inquiry beneath it. She set down her fork and considered. "I do not know yet. Some days I think I made a terrible mistake. The miners do not care about fine pastries or decorated cakes. They want quantity over quality. And I am alone here, which is harder than I expected." "You have friends, surely, acquaintances, customers, but friends?" Olivia shook her head. "The married women do not quite trust me, being single and running my own business. And the single women my age are all looking to get married, not to befriend the competition." Austin frowned. "That seems unfair." "It is simply the way things are." Olivia forced a smile. "But tell me about the ranch. Do you enjoy the work?" "I do. It is hard but honest. I work with the horses mostly. We breed and train them for the mines and for freight companies. I have always had a way with animals." He paused, a shadow crossing his face. "Those horses today, the ones that ran wild, they were ours. Someone spooked them deliberately, cut the traces, and fired a gun near their heads. The driver barely had time to jump clear. Who would do such a thing? I have my suspicions. There is a man named Caleb Stone who owns a competing ranch. He has been trying to drive us out of business for months, undercutting our prices, spreading rumors. This would be just like him." Austin's jaw tightened. "But I cannot prove it, and the sheriff will not do anything without proof." Olivia heard the frustration in his voice and reached across the table without thinking, covering his hand with hers. "I am sorry. That must be difficult." Austin looked down at their joined hands, then turned his palm up to hold hers properly. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so intimate it made her breath catch. "You have calluses," he said softly, "from kneading dough." "And you have calluses from working with horses," Olivia replied, feeling the rough spots on his palm. "We both work with our hands." "Yes." He smiled at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her feel warm all over. "I like that. Too many people think work is beneath them, but there is honor in it, satisfaction." They talked through the rest of dinner, the conversation flowing easily from one topic to another. Olivia learned that Austin was 26 years old, that he could play the harmonica but could not carry a tune, that he wanted to own his own ranch someday. Austin learned that Olivia was 22, that she could speak a little German from her grandmother, that her dream was to open a restaurant where she could cook whatever she wanted without worrying about what would sell. When the pie was finished and the dishes cleared, Austin stood reluctantly. "I should go. I have to be up before dawn tomorrow." Olivia walked him to the door, not wanting the evening to end. "Thank you for coming. I enjoyed this very much." "So did I." Austin hesitated, then reached up and gently tucked one of the loose tendrils of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek. "May I see you again, Olivia? Properly, I mean, courting." Olivia's heart leaped. "I would like that very much." "Sunday, then. I could take you for a ride, show you some of the country around here, pack a picnic." "That sounds perfect." Austin smiled, that wonderful transformative smile, and put on his hat. "Until Sunday, then. Good night, Olivia." "Good night, Austin." She watched him descend the stairs and disappear into the darkness of the street below, then closed the door and leaned against it, a smile spreading across her face. She touched her cheek where his fingers had been and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. The next few days passed slowly. Olivia threw herself into her work, experimenting with new recipes and trying to ignore the butterflies in her stomach whenever she thought about Sunday. She saw Austin once, when he came into town on Thursday to deliver horses to the freight office. He stopped by the bakery and bought half a dozen rolls, and the way he looked at her across the counter made her blush like a schoolgirl. "Sunday," he said as he was leaving, and it was both a promise and a question. "Sunday," Olivia confirmed, and watched him walk away with his easy, confident stride. On Saturday evening, there was a knock at her door just as she was closing up. Olivia opened it to find a woman she had never seen before, tall and blonde with hard blue eyes and an expression that could freeze water. "You are Olivia Zimmerman?" The woman asked without preamble. "I am. Can I help you?" "I am Lucille Stone. My father owns the Stone Ranch." She said it like Olivia should be impressed. "I came to give you some advice, woman to woman. Stay away from Austin Hayes." Olivia felt her spine stiffen. "I beg your pardon. Austin and I have an understanding," Lucille said, her voice cold. "We are going to be married, though he is too proud to accept my father's terms yet. But he will, eventually. And when he does, I do not want to have to deal with any complications from foolish girls who do not know their place." An understanding, Olivia repeated, her stomach sinking. Austin never mentioned you. Why would he? Men like him do not discuss business with casual acquaintances. Lucille looked her up and down dismissively. You are pretty enough, I suppose, in a common sort of way, but Austin needs more than a pretty face. He needs connections, money, a future. All things my father can provide. What can you offer? Bread. Olivia felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. If Austin and you have an understanding, then perhaps you should be having this conversation with him, not with me. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to close up. She shut the door before Lucille could respond, then leaned against it, her hands shaking. Was it true? Did Austin have some arrangement with this horrible woman? It would explain why someone like him, handsome and kind and strong, would be interested in her. Perhaps he was simply passing time until he made his decision about his future. Olivia did not sleep well that night, and by Sunday morning she had nearly convinced herself to send Austin a note canceling their picnic. But pride stopped her. She would go, she would ask him directly about Lucille Stone, and then she would have her answer. She refused to be a coward. Austin arrived at noon in a small wagon pulled by a sweet-faced chestnut mare. He helped Olivia up to the seat, his hands steady on her waist, and she tried not to think about how right it felt, how perfectly she fit against him. They drove north out of town, following a road that climbed steadily into the mountains. The day was beautiful, warm but not hot, with a breeze that carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. Austin pointed out landmarks as they went. The path to Silver Peak Ranch, the creek where he liked to fish, the meadow where elk sometimes grazed at dawn. After about an hour, he turned off the road and followed a narrow track through the trees. They emerged into a clearing beside a small lake, its surface reflecting the sky like a mirror. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. "This is beautiful," Olivia breathed. "I thought you might like it," Austin said, looking pleased. "I found it my first month here. Sometimes I come up when I need to think." He helped her down from the wagon and spread a blanket in the shade of a large pine. Olivia had packed cold chicken and fresh bread, along with cheese and apples and a jar of lemonade. They ate in comfortable silence, watching the water and listening to the birds. Finally, Olivia gathered her courage. "Austin, I need to ask you something." He looked at her, his expression open and relaxed. "Anything." "You know a woman named Lucille Stone?" The change in Austin was immediate. His jaw tightened and his eyes went hard. "Yes." "Why? She came to see me yesterday. She said that you and she have an understanding. That you are going to marry her." Austin stood abruptly and walked to the edge of the lake, his back to her. Olivia watched him, her heart sinking. The silence stretched out until she could not bear it any longer. "Austin, please. I need to know the truth." He turned back to her, and the anger in his face startled her. "Lucille Stone is a liar. There is no understanding between us, no arrangement. Her father has been trying to marry her off to me for months because he wants access to Silver Peak Ranch. He thinks if I marry Lucille, he can eventually take over our operation. But I've told both of them repeatedly that I am not interested." "Then why would she say such things?" "Because she is not used to hearing no." Austin walked back and knelt beside the blanket, taking Olivia's hands in his. "Lucille is accustomed to getting whatever she wants. Her father is one of the richest men in the county, and she has been spoiled her entire life. When I turned her down the first time, she thought I was playing hard to get. When I kept turning her down, she got angry. I think she actually came to believe that we would end up together, that it was inevitable." Olivia searched his face, wanting desperately to believe him. "You have no feelings for her at all?" "None. She is cruel and petty, and she treats people like possessions." He squeezed her hands. "Olivia, I would not have asked to court you if I had any attachment elsewhere. I am not that kind of man." "I did not really think you were," Olivia admitted. "But she was so certain, and I barely know you, and I thought perhaps I had misread everything." Austin reached up and cupped her face gently. "You did not misread anything. From the moment I saw you in that street, throwing yourself in front of those horses to save that little girl, I knew you were someone special, someone brave and good and real. And when we had dinner together, when we talked for hours and it felt like minutes, I knew I wanted to spend more time with you, as much time as you will give me." "I want that too," Olivia whispered. "I have been alone for so long, and then you appeared, and suddenly everything felt different. Brighter. I have been waiting for someone like you," she added, the words coming from somewhere deep inside her. "Someone who sees me, really sees me, not just what I can provide or what use I might be. Someone who makes me feel like I matter." Austin's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, his touch infinitely gentle. "You do matter. More than you know." Then he leaned in and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Olivia's eyes fluttered closed, and she kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his shoulders. It was her first real kiss, and it made her feel like she was falling and flying at the same time. When they finally pulled apart, Austin rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you, Olivia Zimmerman. I know it is too soon to say that, I know I should wait, but I have never been good at hiding how I feel." "I am falling in love with you too," Olivia said, her voice shaking with emotion. "And I do not care if it is too soon. It feels right." They spent the rest of the afternoon by the lake, talking and laughing and stealing kisses when the mood struck them. Austin told her about his dreams for the future, about the piece of land he had been saving to buy, about the house he wanted to build with his own hands. Olivia told him about her father, about learning to bake at his side, about the grief that still sometimes caught her unexpectedly. As the sun began to sink toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Austin helped her back into the wagon. "I do not want this day to end," he said. "Neither do I, but we have time. We have all the time in the world." On the drive back to Georgetown, Olivia leaned against Austin's shoulder, feeling happier than she had in years. She did not know what Lucille Stone might do next, did not know how they would navigate the obstacles that surely lay ahead. But for now, in this moment, she had Austin's arm around her and the promise of tomorrow, and that was enough. The trouble started 2 days later. Olivia was in the bakery before dawn as usual, mixing dough for the day's bread, when she heard shouting in the street. She wiped her hands and went to the window, peering out into the gray pre-dawn light. A crowd was gathering near the church, and she could see the orange glow of flames. She ran outside, her heart pounding. The building on fire was the livery stable, and already the flames were leaping high, crackling and roaring as they consumed the dry wood. Men were running with buckets, forming a chain from the town pump, but Olivia could see it was hopeless. The fire had too much of a head start. "The horses," someone screamed. "The horses are still inside." Without thinking, Olivia ran toward the stable. She could hear the animals inside screaming in terror, smell the acrid smoke that billowed from every opening. The front doors were engulfed in flames, but there was a side door that was still clear. Olivia, no. It was Thomas from the general store, his face smudged with soot. "It is too dangerous." But Olivia was already at the side door, yanking it open. Smoke poured out, thick and choking, and heat hit her face like a physical blow. She pulled her apron up over her nose and mouth and plunged inside. The stable was chaos. Horses reared and kicked in their stalls, wild with panic. Olivia could barely see through the smoke, but she felt her way along the wall to the first stall. The door was latched, and her fingers fumbled with the metal, finally getting it open. The horse inside, a big bay gelding, charged past her toward the open door and freedom. She moved to the next stall and the next, releasing horse after horse. Her lungs burned and tears streamed down her face from the smoke. She counted stalls in her head. 8 so far. How many horses did the livery hold? 10. 12. A beam crashed down behind her, sending up a shower of sparks. The fire was spreading fast, eating through the roof. Olivia knew she should get out, but she heard whinnying from further back, terrified and desperate. She pushed deeper into the stable, crouching low where the air was slightly clearer. 2 more stalls. She got them open and the horses bolted past her. The heat was incredible now, like being inside an oven. Her skin felt tight and she could not draw a full breath. The last stall. Olivia's vision was narrowing, gray at the edges. She fumbled for the latch, got it open, but the horse inside was too frightened to move. A small mare pressed into the back corner, eyes rolling white. "Come on," Olivia croaked, but her voice was barely a whisper. "Please, come on." Then strong hands grabbed her shoulders, pulling her back. She tried to fight, tried to explain about the mare, but she had no air left. She was lifted, carried, and then suddenly there was cool, fresh air and she was coughing, gasping, her lungs on fire. "Breathe, just breathe," a voice said, and Olivia realized it was Austin. He was there holding her and his face was white with fear. "What were you thinking? You could have died." "The horses," Olivia managed between coughs. "One more, still inside." Austin looked at the stable, which was now fully engulfed, then back at her. His jaw set in that determined way she was coming to recognize. "Stay here." Before she could stop him, he pulled his bandana up over his nose and ran back into the burning building. Olivia screamed, tried to stand and follow, but Thomas held her back. "Let him go," Thomas said. "He knows what he is doing." The seconds stretched like hours. The crowd had given up on fighting the fire and was focused now on keeping it from spreading to adjacent buildings. Olivia stared at the stable doors, willing Austin to appear, praying harder than she ever had in her life. Finally, she saw movement. Austin emerged from the smoke, leading the small mare. They were both moving slowly and Austin was limping. He got the mare clear of the building, then collapsed to his knees. Olivia tore free of Thomas's grip and ran to him. "Austin, are you hurt?" "Kicked me," Austin said, his voice raspy. She panicked. "It is fine." But it was not fine. Olivia could see blood seeping through his pant leg, could see the way he was favoring his left side. "We need to get you to the doctor." "The horses first. Make sure they are all accounted for, that none of them are injured." Austin tried to stand and nearly fell. Olivia caught him, and between her and Thomas, they managed to get him to his feet. The doctor's office was at the other end of town, and by the time they got Austin there, he was barely conscious. Dr. Morrison, a brisk older man with kind eyes, took one look at Austin's leg and whistled. "That is a bad kick. He is lucky it did not break the bone. Help me get him on the table." Olivia stayed while the doctor cleaned and bandaged the wound, holding Austin's hand when he flinched at the pain. The doctor also treated the burns on his hands and arms, minor but painful, and listened to his lungs. "You will live," Dr. Morrison pronounced finally, "but you need rest. No working for at least a week and keep that leg elevated. You," he turned to Olivia, "need treatment too. Your lungs took in a lot of smoke." Olivia let the doctor examine her, but she could not take her eyes off Austin. He was watching her too, and despite everything, he smiled. "We make quite a pair," he said, "both playing hero." "You should not have gone back in," Olivia said, her voice fierce. "You could have died for one horse." "You went in for 10, Austin pointed out. "And you said yourself there was one more. I could not leave her. Neither could I." Dr. Morrison looked between them and shook his head. You are both fools, brave fools, but fools nonetheless. Now you need to get home and rest, both of you, and drink plenty of water. Your throats will be sore for days. Austin's boss from Silver Peak Ranch, a gruff man named Walter Hogan, arrived as they were leaving the doctor's office. He looked Austin over with a critical eye, then clapped him carefully on the shoulder. Heard what you did. Damned foolish, but brave. You take the time you need to heal. Your job will be waiting. He turned to Olivia. You too, miss. The whole town is talking about how you ran in there first, saved most of those animals single-handedly. That took courage. After he left, Austin looked at Olivia seriously. I need to tell you something. The fire was not an accident. How do you know? I smelled kerosene when I went in. Someone set that fire deliberately, and I would bet everything I own that it was Caleb Stone or one of his men. Olivia felt cold despite the warm morning. Why would he burn down the livery? Because half those horses were ours, boarding there while we wait for our new barn to be finished. This was another attempt to hurt Silver Peak Ranch. Austin's face was grim. And it almost killed you. If anything had happened to you because of this feud, I would never forgive myself. It is not your fault, and we are both fine. Olivia took his hand. Come on. I am taking you to my apartment where I can keep an eye on you. Do not argue, she added when he opened his mouth to protest. You can barely walk and you need someone to look after you. I am a much better nurse than I am a hero. Austin smiled despite himself. Yes, madam. Getting Austin up the stairs to her apartment was a challenge, but they managed. Olivia settled him on her small sofa, propped his leg up with pillows, and brought him water. Then she sat beside him, suddenly exhausted. This has been quite a morning, she said. That is an understatement. Austin pulled her closer, careful of his injuries. I meant what I said earlier. When I thought you were still in that building, when I could not find you in the smoke, I have never been so terrified in my life. The thought of losing you before I even really had you. You are not going to lose me, Olivia said firmly. We are going to figure this out together. Caleb Stone and his awful daughter do not get to win. Speaking of Lucille, I would bet she is behind some of this too. She came to see me last week, before she went to you. Threatened to make my life miserable if I did not reconsider her father's offer. I told her she could try her worst. He sighed. I should have taken her more seriously. Over the next few days, Austin stayed in Olivia's apartment while he recovered. She slept in her small bedroom and gave him the sofa, though it was barely long enough for his frame. She went down to the bakery each morning before dawn, baked enough to meet her orders, then came back up to check on him. In the afternoons, when the shop was closed, they talked for hours, learning each other's stories, each other's dreams. Olivia had never been so happy. Having Austin in her space felt right, natural. She loved making him meals, loved seeing him smile when she brought him coffee exactly how he liked it. She loved the way he watched her move around the small apartment, his eyes following her with an expression that made her heart race. On the fourth day, Austin was feeling well enough to sit at the table, and Olivia was teaching him to knead bread dough. You have to put your weight into it, she instructed, laughing as he awkwardly pushed at the dough. Like this. She put her hands over his, guiding his movements, and suddenly they were very close, her front pressed against his back, her cheek near his shoulder. Austin turned his head, and their faces were inches apart. I am not paying attention to the bread anymore, he said softly. Neither am I, Olivia whispered. He kissed her then, deep and slow, and Olivia forgot about everything else. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. I want to marry you, Austin said suddenly. I know we have only known each other 2 weeks. I know it is fast and people will talk, but I do not care. I love you, Olivia. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build that house I told you about and fill it with children and laughter. I want to grow old with you." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, yes, yes, I will marry you. I love you too, Austin. I have loved you since the moment you pulled me out of the street, maybe even before that. And I do not care what anyone thinks." Austin whooped and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around despite his injured leg. They were both laughing, giddy with joy and the sheer impossibility of finding each other. "We should tell people," Austin said when they finally calmed down. "Make it official. And I need to buy you a ring, though it might take me a while to save up for a proper one." "I do not need a fancy ring," Olivia said. "I just need you." They decided to tell Austin's boss first, and then Olivia's few friends in town. Everyone they told was surprised by the speed of the engagement but genuinely happy for them. Thomas clapped Austin on the back and told him he had excellent taste. Mrs. Henderson cried and hugged Olivia, telling her it was about time she found someone worthy of her. The only sour note came when word reached the Stone Ranch. 2 days after the engagement was announced, Caleb Stone himself came to the bakery. He was a large man, heavy-set and red-faced, with small, mean eyes and an air of someone used to getting his way. He stood in Olivia's shop, looking around with obvious disdain. "So you are the woman who has bewitched Austin Hayes," he said without preamble. Olivia drew herself up to her full height, which was still a good 6 inches shorter than Stone. "If by bewitched you mean we fell in love, then yes, I suppose I am." "Love." He spat the word like a curse. "Hayes does not know what is good for him. My daughter could have given him everything: money, status, a secure future. What can you offer? A failing bakery and a pretty face. Mr. Stone, you need to leave my shop, now." "I came here to make you an offer," Stone continued, ignoring her. $500 if you break off this engagement and leave Georgetown. That is more than you could make in a year of selling bread." Olivia felt anger rise in her chest, hot and fierce. "I am not for sale, and neither is my relationship with Austin. Now get out before I have the sheriff escort you out." "You are making a mistake," Stone said, his voice turning cold. "I do not take kindly to people who interfere with my plans. Bad things happen to them. Are you threatening me? I am warning you. Think carefully about your choices, Miss Zimmerman. You might find that life in Georgetown becomes very difficult for you." After he left, Olivia sank into her chair, shaking. She knew she should tell Austin about the visit, about the threat, but she did not want to worry him. He was still recovering, still dealing with the aftermath of the fire. This was her problem to handle, but Stone made good on his threat. Over the next week, strange things started happening. Olivia's flower deliveries were repeatedly delayed or sent to the wrong address. Several of her regular customers stopped coming, and she heard through Thomas that Stone had offered them free bread if they would boycott her shop. Someone broke her front window one night, and the sheriff shrugged and said it was probably just drunk minors. Nothing to be done. Austin saw through her attempts to hide what was happening and was furious. "This has gone too far. I am going to talk to Stone myself, make him back off." "No," Olivia said firmly. "That is exactly what he wants. He wants you to lose your temper, do something he can use against you. We need to be smarter than him." "Then what do you suggest?" Olivia thought about it. "We get married, soon. If we are married, you will be my family legally. Stone will have less leverage and it will be harder for him to intimidate me." "I want to marry you regardless," Austin said. "But I do not want you to rush because of him." "I am not rushing because of him. I am doing it because every day I wait is one more day we are not starting our life together. What is the point in waiting?" They were married the following Sunday in the small church in Georgetown, with about 30 people in attendance. Olivia wore her blue dress and carried wildflowers that Austin had picked that morning. She had never seen anything more handsome than Austin standing at the altar in his best suit, his eyes bright as he watched her walk down the aisle. Thomas gave her away, and Mrs. Henderson cried throughout the ceremony. The vows were simple but heartfelt, and when the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Austin kissed her with such tenderness that Olivia felt tears slip down her cheeks. After the ceremony, there was a reception at the town hall. Someone had donated food and another person brought a fiddle. Austin and Olivia danced their first dance as husband and wife, spinning slowly while everyone clapped and cheered. "Happy," Austin whispered in her ear. "So happy I can barely breathe," Olivia replied. "You are my family now, Austin Hayes, my home, and you are mine." They spent their wedding night in Olivia's small apartment, which was now their apartment. Austin carried her over the threshold despite his legs still being tender, and Olivia laughed at his determination. It was awkward and sweet and perfect, the two of them learning each other in this new way, with patience and love and joy. Afterward, lying wrapped in each other's arms, Austin traced patterns on Olivia's shoulder. "I never thought I would be this lucky," he said quietly. "Finding you was like finding the other half of myself." "I feel the same way," Olivia whispered. "Like I was waiting my whole life without knowing what I was waiting for, and then there you were." But their happiness was short-lived. 3 days after the wedding, Austin came home from work early, his face grave. Olivia was just pulling bread from the oven and took one look at him and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" "Walter got a notice from the bank. Someone bought up the mortgage on the ranch property. They are calling in the loan, demanding full payment within 30 days. Austin sank into a chair, running his hands through his hair. "There is no way we can raise that kind of money so fast. If we cannot pay, we lose everything. Who bought the mortgage?" But Olivia already knew the answer before Austin said it. Caleb Stone. They sat together in stunned silence. This was it, the final blow Stone had been planning. Without the ranch, Austin would lose his job. Without his job, they would have no income beyond what the bakery brought in, which was barely enough to support Olivia alone. They would be forced to leave Georgetown, forced to start over somewhere else with nothing. "We will fight this," Olivia said finally. "There has to be a way. Maybe we can go to the bank, explain the situation, get an extension." Walter already tried. "The bank sold the mortgage legally. There is nothing they can do." Olivia felt desperation rising. "Then we will find another way. We will borrow money, sell things I do not know. But we are not going to let Stone win. We are not going to let him destroy what we have built." Austin pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I am so sorry. I brought this into your life. If you had never met me, you would be safe from all of this." "Do not you dare," Olivia said fiercely, pulling back to look at him. "Do not you dare apologize for loving me. Stone is a bully and a cruel man, but he does not get to take this away from us. We will find a way, together." Over the next few days, Olivia and Austin scrambled to find solutions. Austin and his co-workers talked about pooling their money, but it was not nearly enough. Walter tried to find other investors, but word of Stone's involvement had gotten around, and no one wanted to get involved in the feud. Olivia lay awake at night, her mind racing. There had to be something they could do, some way to fight back. Stone had power and money, but they had truth on their side. They had witnesses to his threats, evidence of the fire at the livery. The answer came to her at dawn on the 5th day. She shook Austin awake, her eyes bright with excitement. "The law," she said. "We take Stone to court for harassment and arson. If we can prove he was behind the fire, he will go to jail, and if he is in jail, he cannot call in the loan." Austin sat up, considering. "We would need proof. Real proof, not just suspicions. Then we get proof. Someone at the Stone Ranch must know something. Maybe one of his workers set the fire on his orders. People talk, Austin. We just need to find the right person to talk to. It took another week of careful questions and discreet conversations, but finally, they got a break. A young ranch hand named Jimmy who worked for Stone came to them in secret. He was barely 19, and he was terrified, but he had information. "Mr. Stone ordered the fire," Jimmy said, his voice shaking. "I heard him talking to his foreman about it. He wanted to hurt the Silver Peak Ranch, and he did not care who got in the way. I did not want to be part of it, but I need this job. My family depends on the money I send home." "Will you testify to that in court?" Austin asked. Jimmy hesitated, then nodded. "If you promise to protect me from Stone's revenge, he will kill me if he finds out I talked." "We will protect you," Olivia promised. "You are doing the right thing." With Jimmy's testimony and the evidence they had gathered, they went to the sheriff. At first, the lawman was reluctant to act against someone as powerful as Caleb Stone, but when Olivia and Austin laid out all the evidence, including the kerosene traces from the fire and the testimonies of several witnesses, he had no choice. Caleb Stone was arrested on a Saturday morning, taken from his ranch in chains. The whole town turned out to watch, and Olivia saw more than a few people looking satisfied. Stone had made a lot of enemies over the years. The trial was held 2 weeks later. The courtroom was packed, with people standing in the back and crowding the doorway. Austin and Olivia sat in the front row, their hands clasped together. Jimmy testified first, his voice steady despite his obvious fear. He told the court exactly what he had heard, and when Stone's lawyer tried to discredit him, Jimmy held his ground. Then the fire marshal testified about the kerosene. Then several townspeople testified about Stone's threats and intimidation. By the end of the day, it was clear that Stone was guilty. The judge found him guilty of arson and attempted murder and sentenced him to 10 years in prison. As the sentence was read, Stone turned and glared at Austin and Olivia with such hatred that Olivia felt chilled. "This is not over," he mouthed. But it was over. With Stone in prison, the mortgage he had bought reverted to his estate, and his lawyers, eager to avoid further legal trouble, sold it back to a more reasonable lender at fair terms. Silver Peak Ranch was saved. Lucille Stone left Georgetown immediately after her father's conviction, heading back east to live with relatives. Olivia heard later that she had married a banker twice her age, presumably for his money. She did not care. That part of their lives was behind them now. As autumn turned to winter, life settled into a new rhythm. Austin and Olivia moved into a small house that Walter Hogan owned and was willing to rent to them cheaply. It had 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and a small yard. Olivia continued to run her bakery, and with Stone's interference gone, business began to pick up. Austin was promoted to head horse trainer at the ranch, with a significant raise in pay. They talked about their future over dinner each night, making plans. They would save money for the next few years, and then Austin would buy that land he had been eyeing. They would build their house, start their own horse breeding operation, and they would have children, lots of them if they were blessed. By the following spring, Olivia's dreams of opening a restaurant were taking shape. She had saved enough to lease a larger space on Main Street, and with Austin's encouragement and financial backing, she took the risk. The restaurant opened in May of 1884, and it was immediately popular. Miners and merchants alike came to enjoy Olivia's cooking, which went far beyond simple bread and biscuits to include roasted meats, vegetable stews, pies, and cakes. Austin helped out when he could, greeting customers and handling the accounts. People loved seeing the two of them work together, finishing each other's sentences, moving around each other in the kitchen like dancers who knew every step. In July, Olivia realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but she waited until she was certain before telling Austin. She planned it carefully, making his favorite meal and baking a special cake with Papa written in icing on top. When Austin saw the cake, he stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at Olivia with wonder in his eyes. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "We are going to have a baby," Olivia confirmed, and then she was swept up in his arms, spun around until she was dizzy and laughing. "A baby," Austin kept repeating, his voice full of awe. "We are going to have a baby." The pregnancy was not easy. Olivia suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and the high altitude sometimes left her breathless and weak. But Austin was devoted, taking over more of the restaurant work, insisting she rest whenever possible, bringing her tea and crackers in bed when the nausea was bad. As her belly grew round, Olivia had to hire more help at the restaurant. She trained 2 young women to cook her recipes, teaching them the way her father had taught her, with patience and precision. The restaurant continued to thrive even as she worked less, which gave her hope that it would survive after the baby came. Austin bought a cradle from a carpenter in town and spent his evenings sanding it smooth, making sure there were no rough edges that could hurt their baby. He painted it white with blue trim, and Olivia made tiny blankets and gowns from soft fabric. On a cold February night in 1885, Olivia went into labor. The midwife was called, and Austin paced the small bedroom like a caged animal, helpless and terrified. It was a long labor, lasting well into the next day, but finally, just as the sun was setting, their son was born. They named him Samuel Thomas Hayes, after Austin's father and after Thomas from the general store who had been so kind to Olivia when she first arrived in Georgetown. Samuel had dark hair like his father and his mother's hazel eyes, and Austin cried when he held his son for the first time. "He is perfect," Austin whispered, looking at Olivia with such love that it made her heart ache. "You are perfect. I am the luckiest man alive." "We are lucky," Olivia corrected, reaching up to touch her son's tiny hand. "Look what we made, Austin. Look what our love created." Being parents was harder than either of them had anticipated. Samuel was a colicky baby who cried often and slept rarely. They took turns walking him around the house in the middle of the night, singing lullabies and rocking him endlessly. Olivia's restaurant business suffered a bit in those early months because she could not be there as much, but she did not care. Her son was more important than any business. As Samuel grew, his personality emerged. He was curious and fearless, always getting into things, exploring every corner of the house. At 1 year old, he was walking and trying to climb everything. At 2, he was talking in full sentences and asking a million questions. Austin was a wonderful father, patient and playful. He taught Samuel about horses and let the boy sit in front of him in the saddle when he rode. He built him toys and told him stories about growing up on the farm in Missouri. Watching them together, Olivia felt a contentment she had never known was possible. In the summer of 1886, Austin finally had enough money saved to buy the land he had been wanting. It was 200 acres of beautiful meadow and forest about 3 miles from Georgetown, with a creek running through it and mountains on all sides. They broke ground on their house in August, and Austin worked on it every spare moment he had. The house was modest but well built, with 3 bedrooms, a large kitchen for Olivia, and a covered porch that looked out over the meadow. Austin built it with his own hands, with help from the men at Silver Peak Ranch. By the following spring, it was finished, and they moved in on a perfect April day. Olivia stood on her new porch, holding Samuel on her hip, watching Austin carry in the last of their furniture. This house, this land, this family, it was everything she had dreamed of and more. The bakery that had barely kept her fed in those early months seemed like a lifetime ago. "What do you think, Samuel?" she asked her son. "Do you like your new home?" "Big," Samuel declared happily. "Very big house." Austin joined them on the porch, wrapping his arms around both of them. "Welcome home," he said softly. Olivia discovered she was pregnant again that fall. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect. She continued to work at the restaurant until she was nearly 8 months along, and then she hired a manager to run it full-time. She had trained her staff well, and the restaurant would be fine without her daily presence. Their daughter was born in May of 1888, on a sunny morning that seemed full of promise. They named her Rose Marie Hayes, and she was the image of her mother, with dark curly hair and delicate features. Samuel, now 3 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything. The years that followed were full and busy. Austin started his horse breeding operation, using everything he had learned at Silver Peak Ranch. His reputation for training quality animals spread, and soon he had more business than he could handle. He hired 2 workers to help, including Jimmy, the young man who had testified against Caleb Stone. Jimmy had proved himself trustworthy and hardworking, and he was loyal to Austin. Olivia eventually sold the restaurant to her manager, deciding she would rather focus on her family. She still baked, selling bread and pastries to the general store a few times a week, but it was a hobby now rather than a necessity. She poured her energy into creating a warm, loving home for her family. Samuel grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved horses like his father. Rose was quieter, more thoughtful, but she had a stubborn streak that reminded Austin of Olivia. Watching them play together in the meadow, Olivia sometimes had to pinch herself to make sure it was all real. In 1890, Olivia gave birth to their 3rd child, another son they named Jacob Walter Hayes after Austin's brother and his old boss. Jacob was a happy baby with blonde hair and blue eyes, sunny and content where Samuel had been fussy. Their family felt complete now, though Olivia knew she would welcome more children if they were blessed with them. She loved being a mother, loved the chaos and noise and joy of a house full of children. It was so different from her lonely childhood as an only child with elderly parents. Austin's business continued to thrive. He developed a reputation for honesty and quality, and people came from all over Colorado to buy his horses. The modest savings he had started with had grown into real financial security. They were not rich by any means, but they were comfortable, and their children would never know the kind of want and fear that both Austin and Olivia had experienced in their younger years. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Austin took Olivia back to the lake where they had their first picnic. Walter and his wife agreed to watch the children for the day, and it was just the 2 of them, like old times. They spread a blanket in the same spot under the pine tree and ate the lunch Olivia had packed. The lake was just as beautiful as she remembered, mirror calm and reflecting the sky. "Do you remember what I told you here?" Austin asked, taking her hand. "That you were falling in love with me," Olivia said. "That it was too soon, but you could not help it." "I also said I wanted to build a house and fill it with children, that I wanted to grow old with you." He smiled. "We are well on our way to fulfilling those promises." "We are," Olivia agreed, "though I must say growing old is happening faster than I expected. I found a gray hair last week." Austin laughed. "I have had gray hairs for 2 years now. You are just catching up." He pulled her closer. "But you are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. More beautiful now than the day I met you, if that is possible. Flatterer. I mean it." His expression turned serious. "Sometimes I think about that day when I pulled you out of the street. What if I had been a minute later? What if I had not been in town at all? Our whole lives could have been different." "But you were there," Olivia said softly, "and I was there, and we found each other despite everything. That is not luck, Austin, that is fate." "Fate," he repeated. "I like that." He kissed her then, deep and sweet, and Olivia felt the same flutter in her stomach that she had felt 10 years ago. Some things never changed, she thought. Some loves were strong enough to withstand anything. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, they packed up and headed home. The children would be waiting, probably driving Walter and his wife crazy by now. There would be dinner to make and baths to give and stories to read before bed. There would be all the normal, mundane tasks of family life, and Olivia could not wait. This was her life now, the life she had built with Austin. It was not always easy, but it was real and full and overflowing with love. The years continued to pass, marked by birthdays and holidays and the changing seasons. Samuel grew tall and strong, taking after his father in looks and temperament. At age 10, he was already helping Austin with the horses, showing a natural talent for training. Rose developed a love of reading and could often be found curled up with a book, lost in some story. Jacob was the adventurer, always climbing trees and exploring the creek, bringing home frogs and interesting rocks. In 1893, Olivia gave birth to their fourth child, a daughter they named Clara Jane Hayes after Austin's mother. Clara had red gold hair that came from neither parent, and Austin joked that she must have gotten it from some distant ancestor on his side. She was a happy baby who smiled at everyone, and her siblings doted on her. The house felt full and alive now, always buzzing with activity. There were scraped knees to bandage and quarrels to referee and endless loads of laundry to wash. But there was also laughter and hugs, and the simple joy of family dinner around the table they had built together. Austin expanded the horse breeding operation, buying more land and building a proper barn. He started training horses specifically for ranch work, and his animals became known throughout Colorado for their intelligence and steady temperament. He hired more workers, created a system for record keeping, and basically built a thriving business from nothing but hard work and determination. Olivia continued to bake, now teaching Rose and Clara how to make bread and pastries. Rose took to it naturally, her careful nature perfect for the precision baking required. Clara was more enthusiastic than skilled, and they often ended up laughing over her lopsided cookies and oddly shaped rolls. But they were together, and that was what mattered. In 1895, news reached Georgetown that Caleb Stone had died in prison. Austin and Olivia received a letter from Stone's lawyer, informing them that, in a final twist of irony, Stone had left his entire estate to charity rather than let it go to Lucille, whom he blamed for his downfall. The lawyer seemed to think they would find this amusing, and Austin did laugh when he read it. "Even in death, he was a mean old man," Austin said, shaking his head. "But I am glad he is gone. That chapter of our lives is finally closed for good." Olivia agreed. She had not thought about Caleb Stone or Lucille in years, too busy living her life to dwell on old enemies. But it was satisfying to know that their story had ended while hers and Austin's continued, happy and strong. That same year, Thomas from the general store passed away peacefully in his sleep. Olivia wept at his funeral, remembering how kind he had been to her when she was a lonely young woman new to Georgetown. They named their next son, born in 1896, Thomas Austin Hayes in his honor. Little Thomas was a quiet, gentle child who loved animals and seemed to have an almost magical ability to calm frightened horses. The children grew older, the seasons turned, and life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Samuel turned 16 in 1899 and began courting a girl from town, the daughter of the blacksmith. Rose was developing into a beautiful young woman, though she seemed more interested in her books than in boys. Jacob was 12 and still getting into trouble with his adventurous nature, but he had a good heart. Clara at 6 was starting school and loving every minute of it, and little Thomas at 3 was toddling around after his father, trying to copy everything Austin did. On a warm summer evening in 1900, Austin and Olivia sat on their porch after the children had gone to bed, watching the stars come out. Austin had his arm around her, and Olivia leaned against his shoulder, feeling peaceful and content. "You ever think about that day?" Austin asked suddenly. "The day I pulled you out of the street, sometimes," Olivia admitted. "Though it feels like it happened to different people. We were so young, so uncertain about everything." "I was certain about you," Austin said. "From that very first moment I knew you were someone special. I just did not know how special, how much you would change my life." Olivia turned to look at him. In the fading light, she could see the gray that now liberally streaked his dark hair, the lines around his eyes from years of smiling and working in the sun. He was 41 years old now, not the young cowboy who had swept her off her feet. But to her, he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. "You changed my life too," she said softly. "I was so lost when I came to Georgetown, so alone. I thought I was looking for a fresh start, for a chance to build a successful business. But what I really needed was you, someone who saw me, who valued me, who loved me exactly as I was." "I will always love you exactly as you are," Austin promised. "When we are 90 and gray and the children have children of their own, I will still love you the way I loved you that day by the lake. More, probably, because every year with you just adds more good memories, more reasons to be grateful." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "I have been waiting for someone like you," she whispered, repeating the words she had said to him all those years ago. "I just did not know it until you appeared, and now I cannot imagine my life without you in it." They sat together as the stars multiplied overhead, holding each other close. Inside the house, their children slept safely in their beds. In the barn, the horses Austin had trained rustled quietly in their stalls. The life they had built together stretched out around them, solid and real and beautiful. The next few years brought more changes. Samuel married his sweetheart in a lovely ceremony in the Georgetown church, the same church where Austin and Olivia had married. Rose announced that she wanted to become a teacher and began studying with the schoolteacher in town. Jacob decided he wanted to be a veterinarian and started apprenticing with the local animal doctor. Clara and Thomas continued to grow, each developing their own interests and personalities. In 1902, Samuel and his wife had a baby girl, making Austin and Olivia grandparents for the first time. Holding her granddaughter, Olivia marveled at how fast time had passed. It seemed like just yesterday that she was holding her own newborn son, and now here was his daughter, a new generation. Austin's horse breeding business was now one of the most successful in Colorado. He had trained 2 of his workers to handle most of the day-to-day operations, which gave him more time to spend with Olivia and the children. They took trips into the mountains, camping beside streams and teaching the younger children about nature. They had family dinners every Sunday, with Samuel and his family joining them, the table crowded and noisy and full of love. In 1905, Rose married a young lawyer from Denver, and in 1906, Jacob left for veterinary school back east. Olivia cried when he boarded the train, even though she was proud of him for pursuing his dreams. Austin held her hand and reminded her that Jacob would be back, that he had promised to return to Colorado after finishing school. Clara was growing into a talented baker, even better than Olivia had been at her age. She talked about reopening Olivia's old restaurant someday, running it properly this time with better resources and more help. Olivia encouraged her, telling her stories about the early days when she had done everything herself and nearly run herself into the ground with exhaustion. Thomas, their youngest, surprised everyone by showing an aptitude for business. At 12 years old, he was already helping Austin with the accounts and making suggestions for how to expand the operation. Austin joked that Thomas would probably end up running the whole thing someday. As Austin and Olivia entered their 40s and then their 50s, they watched with satisfaction as their children made their own lives. There were more grandchildren. Samuel had 3 more children, Rose had twins, and Clara married at 20 and quickly started her own family. The house that had once been full of their own children now filled regularly with grandchildren. The noise and chaos something Olivia had grown to love. In 1915, Jacob returned from veterinary school with his degree and a wife, a kind woman he had met back east. He set up a practice in Georgetown, focusing on large animals, and worked closely with Austin's horse breeding operation. Having him back home felt like a missing piece had been restored. Austin turned 60 in 1918, and Olivia threw him a surprise party with all the children and grandchildren in attendance. Looking around at the crowd of people who had come from their love, Austin felt overwhelmed with gratitude. How did we get so lucky? He asked Olivia later when the guests had gone and they were alone. We worked for it, Olivia replied. We fought for each other and for this family. Luck helped, but love did most of the work. They were sitting on their porch again, the same porch where they had sat countless times over the years. The sun was setting, painting the mountains gold and pink. Austin reached for Olivia's hand, noting how her hand fit perfectly in his, just as it always had. If I could go back to that day in 1883, Austin said, when I saw you standing in that street with those runaway horses bearing down on you, I would not change a single thing. Every moment since then, good and bad, has been worth it because I got to spend it with you. Olivia squeezed his hand. I feel the same way. Every morning I wake up next to you, I am grateful. After all these years, you still make me happy. Only happy, Austin teased, his eyes twinkling. Happy, content, loved, cherished, and occasionally irritated when you leave your muddy boots in the kitchen, Olivia listed, laughing. But mostly happy. I can live with that. They sat together as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, and the stars began to appear. 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a life beyond anything either of them could have imagined. Their story had started with a moment of danger and heroism, but it had become something much deeper. A partnership, a friendship, a love that had lasted through decades and would last the rest of their lives. In the years that followed, Austin and Olivia continued to be the center of their family. They celebrated birthdays and holidays, watched more grandchildren be born and grow, offered advice when asked and sometimes when not asked. They took care of each other as age began to slow them down, Austin's limp from his old injury becoming more pronounced, Olivia's hands developing arthritis that made kneading dough difficult. But they were together, and that made every challenge bearable. They still sat on their porch every evening, weather permitting, holding hands and watching the sunset. They still kissed each other good morning and good night. They still said, I love you, every single day, never taking their time together for granted. When Austin turned 70 in 1928, all 5 of their children threw a huge party that included what seemed like half of Georgetown. There were speeches and toasts, and Austin stood before the crowd with Olivia beside him, his arm around her waist. "I am not a man of fancy words," he said, his voice still strong despite his age. "But I want to say something to my wife, who has been my partner in everything for 45 years. Olivia, when I saved you from those horses all those years ago, I thought I was just doing what any decent person would do. But the truth is, you saved me right back. You gave me purpose and love and a family I could never have imagined. Every good thing in my life came from you. Thank you for saying yes when I asked you to marry me. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for being you." There was not a dry eye in the room, and Olivia was crying openly as she stood on her toes to kiss her husband. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Later, alone in their bedroom, Olivia held Austin close. "That was the most romantic thing you have ever said to me," she whispered. "It was all true," Austin replied. "Every word. I know. That is what made it so perfect." They fell asleep in each other's arms, the way they had for thousands of nights before, secure in their love and in the family they had created together. Austin and Olivia Hayes lived into their 80s, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren. Their love story became legend in Georgetown, the tale of the cowboy who saved the baker, and how they had built an empire of love and family from that one moment of heroism. They passed away within months of each other in 1936, having lived full and rich lives. At their joint funeral, their children spoke of their devotion to each other and to their family. Their grandchildren remembered the stories they told and the warmth of their home, and everyone agreed that theirs had been a love for the ages, the kind of love that people write songs about. But for Austin and Olivia, it had never been about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It had been about the everyday moments: breakfast together each morning, working side by side, raising their children, building their dreams. It had been about choosing each other, over and over again, through every challenge and every joy. And in the end, that was the real story. Not the cowboy saving the baker from runaway horses, though that is how it started. The real story was two people who found each other and decided to build something beautiful together, who created a legacy of love that would continue through their children and grandchildren for generations to come. That was the true happy ending, not just living happily ever after, but creating so much love and happiness that it overflowed, touching everyone around them and continuing long after they were gone. Their love became part of Georgetown itself, woven into the history of the town. A reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures start with a single moment of courage and the willingness to open your heart to possibility. And if you visited Georgetown, Colorado today, you could still see the Hayes family legacy. The descendants of Austin and Olivia, who continued to breed horses and run businesses and raise families in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains, carrying forward the values of hard work, love, and commitment that their ancestors had embodied so fully. The restaurant that Clara eventually opened still stands on Main Street, now run by her great-granddaughter. The land that Austin bought and built his house on remains in the family, passed down through generations. But more than the physical legacy, Austin and Olivia left behind something intangible but infinitely more valuable: the example of what true love looks like. Not perfect or without challenges, but real and committed and strong enough to weather any storm. Their story reminded everyone who heard it that love is not just about the dramatic moments, though those matter too. Love is about showing up every day, about choosing your partner again and again, about building something together that is greater than the sum of its parts. And it all started with a woman running into the street to save a child, and a man brave enough to save them both. in the wild territory of Colorado in 1883, when the West was still being settled, and anything seemed possible for those courageous enough to reach for it. Their story was complete, their ending as happy as any could wish for, their love eternal.